approaching Teshuvah.
Bezrat Hashem, the word should be Leilui Nishmat
Shaya ben Lora
Shaya ben Lora
and Yvette Bat Jamilia. Yvette Bat Jamilia.
So, we'll talk a little bit about the concept of Teshuvah. And we'll explore some words of Harambam. But before I begin talking about the concept of Teshuvah, I want to quote a very interesting Hazal. And it says that the sinner, he went, there's a whole description, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, and it says that the sinner goes and tries to understand what to do. What do I do? So there's an elaborate discussion. He approaches the Torah. He approaches the Nebi'im. And each time he's told, if you sin, you got to live by the consequences. HaNefesh ha'arteti tamut. The sinning soul will die. You sin, there's the consequences to your actions. And finally, after a long description in the Gemara, it says he finally, with nowhere else to turn, the Nevi'im reject him, the Torah rejects him. He turns to God himself. And God says, do Teshuvah. Now, what is the point of that story? The point of the story is that Teshuvah is not a logical consequence to your actions. In other words, Teshuvah means I improve. Improving is very nice from that point on. But you still have to pay the price, usually, for the consequences of what you've done before. Even in Jewish law, in Bet Din downstairs, you did something that you are hayav mitah, let's say. And after that you regretted it, you did Teshuvah, Bet Din is going to punish you. That's a fact. In other words, human courts of law don't understand the concept of Teshuvah, which means I can literally erase the past. That doesn't exist anywhere. Actually, it's a gift that God gave to the Jewish people. That we have the power to eradicate our past. And I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit more, what that means to eradicate the past, and we'll discuss it as we move forward. There are two types of Teshuvah that our Gemara discusses. The Gemara brings in the name of Resh Lakish. Now it's interesting that Resh Lakish is the one who said this, because Resh Lakish is the most famous Baal Teshuvah in Shas. Resh Lakish's history was, he was a hoodlum, he was a crook, he was a thief. And he met up with Rabbi Yohanan one day, and Rabbi Yohanan was apparently very good looking, and he sees him swimming in the river, and he thought it was a woman. So he rips off his clothes, jumps in to go after the woman. And he gets there, and lo and behold, it's the chief rabbi of Israel. It's Rabbi Yohanan. So he looks, and he says, your beauty, what a waste. Your beauty should be for women. And Rabbi Yohanan looks back at him and he says, your strength should be for Torah. And at that very moment, the Resh Lakish and Rabbi Yohanan continue with discussion. And he says, by the way, my sister's prettier than me. Do Teshuvah, she's your wife. And Resh Lakish does Teshuvah. There's a whole description that he actually, once he does Teshuvah, he couldn't jump, because he jumped he made a lunge jump into the river. He couldn't get out. He couldn't jump out. He didn't have the same strength. Once he committed to Torah, he already became weakened. Right? That's the story of Resh Lakish. And Resh Lakish himself, the famous Baal Teshuvah, the famous repentant, he makes two observations. And he says, if a person does Teshuvah, all of his sins that he did b'shugeg, by accident, are wiped away. The sins that he did on purpose, b'mezid, they become like shugeg. They're not wiped away, but they have the laws as if you did it by accident. If you did, however, tshuva me'ahava, that's tshuva from fear. But if you do tshuva out of love, then your averot become counted as mitzvot. Interesting statement. Okay, I got it. You could wipe it away. You could turn averot to mitzvot. Why averot to mitzvot? I always ask the question. I never understood that. What does it mean averot to mitzvot? Say tshuva has the power to clean the slate altogether. I never did it. That's already an amazing thing. Now to say that every bad thing is a good thing? Until I came across another Gemara, and this is brought in the Bavli and in the Yerushalmi, which is an interesting story. The story is said of a certain sage who was taken capture by hoodlums, bandits, and they went to the great Rabbi Yohanan, like I said, pretty much the chief rabbi of the Jewish people in Israel at that time. There were two communities. There was the community in Israel, and there was the community in Babel. As far as the community in Israel, Rabbi Yohanan was the head. He was in charge of everybody. And they go to Rabbi Yohanan, the rabbi, what can we do? Give us advice. He looks at the situation, said, where was he captured? Who were the bandits? He turns and says, I'm sorry. Prepare the coffin and the shrouds. There's nothing I could do. Rish Lakish, who was at this point second to Rabbi Yohanan, became a great rabbi, and he was literally the number 2 to Rabbi Yohanan. He hears the story. He says, he's coming back. Don't worry. He goes into his old closet, takes his old clothes off, his bandit clothes that he never threw away, and he puts them on, takes his armor, and he says, 2 are coming back or none are coming back. Meaning I'll either bring him back or I'm dying. And he goes. And the Gemara has a very elaborate description of the story. He gets there, and he doesn't have to lift the weapon. Right away they see the old chief, honor, and he looks like he's coming back, and they greet him with a certain amount of respect, and he has a discussion back and forth, and he negotiates the release of the rabbi, and he comes out. And I said, this Gemara made me understand the other statement of the same Rabbi Rish Lakish. There were 2 aspects of Teshuvah. One is what most of us do on Kippur. We get really scared. Right? You're standing in front of God. We have a whole host of, all of us, every one of us, we have baggage. We haven't been perfect. Nobody here is perfect. We're standing in front of God Almighty. He knows everything. There's nothing we're going to hide from Him. And we come, it's a scary thing to approach God on Yom Kippur. It's a scary thing. At one point, in one area of the Tefillah, it says, if we really knew how scary it was, we just faint. We just are a little numb. So we don't know how scary it is, but we're scared. We come, even shuls that are usually, unfortunately, noisy, this on Kippur, you can ne'ilah, you can start hearing a pin drop. Everybody's nervous. Everyone wants to pray. Everyone wants to get in their prayers. That's what we call teshuvah miyirah. There's another type of teshuvah, which our rabbis tell us is post-Kippur. It's the holiday of Sukkot, especially the holiday of Simchat Torah. where we're festive, and we approach Teshuvah out of love. But what does it really mean? And I think this story tells us the difference. A person doing Teshuvah out of fear, what does he want to do with his past? He wants to lock it away, never see it again, and say, these are the bad things I've done. It's not me. Close it off and say, forget about it. And that's appropriate. But what the Gemara says is there's another stage. And I want to be clear. You can never get to Ahava. You can never get to the Teshuvah of love unless you go through fear. It's important that the Yir'ah precedes it. You have to wish I never did this. This is wrong. I have to. But there's another stage. After I lock it in the closet and push it away. Now, when I'm at a point of Teshuvah me'ahava, I say, you know what? This is me. That is part of my past, the good and the bad. But what I'm going to now understand is that the stuff about me that I don't like, there has to be some way that I could use that for good. There has to be something about even the things that I'm not thrilled about that I could turn into a positive. And hence the Rish Lakish opens the closet, takes out his old garment and says, yeah, guess what? This is me. And all the terrible things I've done, and we don't know how bad it would be. It could have gone to murder. We have no idea. All the terrible things I've done, I'm going to now turn to save a life. I'm going to turn it into a positive. Now, that's tough. Why? Because most of us want to take that past, lock it into a closet, and never see it again. To be able to open that closet and bring in all that baggage out, you have to be very confident in who you are. You have to be a tremendously strong personality. It's at that point that the averot that you do, the teshuvah is the power to turn it to a mitzvah. It's that unique type of teshuvah. So we talk about teshuvah, the natural teshuvah of yir'ah, and teshuvah of love. When we talk about teshuvah, where does this come from, this concept of teshuvah? So, I like to sometimes compare it to societies that surround us, right? We live in a society, modern society, that has two extremes. The Christian fundamentalist or right. What do they do to a sinner? So the sinner is loaded, and this is in fundamentalist thought, with guilt. And he has to be ridden with guilt. And the problem with guilt is, what does guilt do to a person? It paralyzes you. You can't do anything. And so what's the solution in Christian theology? The solution in Christian theology is, yet you can't do anything. You are a sinner, but the solution is submit to the ecclesiastical authority, and they will handle it for you. They will achieve you whatever you need to do. They will achieve you to get a betterment of your position. On the other extreme is the more modern Western society today thought, which is saying, listen, go to a psychologist. What you've done, forget about it. It's over. It's in the past. Move on. Judaism has a path that are neither of them. Judaism has teshuvah with three main ingredients. And these three are the three main ingredients of teshuvah that Rambam brings down in Hilchot Teshuvah. He says, you have to have step one, harata. Harata is not guilt, it's regret. I'll explain the difference because there's a strong difference. I have to regret what I've done. I have to admit that this was wrong. This is not an easy step. I have to be able to wake up, look in the mirror, analyze who I am, analyze what I've done, and say, no good. Most of us don't want to do that. That's very hard work. We will do anything other than look ourselves in the mirror and admit our faults. We will try and avoid that at any cost. We will make excuses. We will make justifications. We will do a lot. Freud has defined all sorts of defense mechanisms that we will employ to justify our wrongdoings. So that Torah says out. We're going to start this. You need to be honest with yourself. Right? You need to be honest with yourself. You need to admit your wrongdoing. You need to regret it. And you need to do what's called a vidui. Vidui is verbalizing what I've done wrong. I need to literally say it. Can't just think it. So I have to say it and I have to regret it. I have to realize this was wrong. And then I have to accept on myself that I won't do it again. So those three simple steps are very different than a guilt-ridden society or just saying forget about it. It means I have to do a lot of work. Guilt is a cop-out because it doesn't cost any work. It just paralyzes me and it puts into my subconscious all sorts of problematic situations and creates unhealthy people. Regret, harata, and vidui is work, and doing the work creates a healthy psyche. It's to say, listen, I've done wrong. This is a fact. It's not a good thing what I did. I fought this person, I yelled at this person, I embarrassed this person, I cheated this person, whatever I did, it's wrong. I need to confront it. But as Freud said, when you confront it in consciousness, you save yourself from sticking it back somewhere in subconscious and becoming an unhealthy person. I need to confront it. I need to admit it. First and foremost, not to anybody but to myself. I need to make amends with it. And that will empower me. Not paralyze me, the opposite. Empower me to change and to become different. And that becomes the three-pronged approach that Rambam talks about to Teshuvah. And none of those can be absent, right? You can't just do it without verbalizing the vidui. And if you do verbalize the vidui, but don't really feel deep sense of regret, then that's useless. And if you have both, but you don't move forward, you don't take the next step to say that I'm going to become better, then it's also, that doesn't accomplish anything. Those three components are really what create, according to Rambam, the Jewish concept of Teshuvah, which, like I said, is not a given. It's the idea of to say, I can literally change the makeup of who I am and become a better and different type of a person. And Rambam also brings in a Teshuvah that an interesting thought process, that when you sit with Teshuvah, how are you supposed to think about it? So it's a very famous Rambam. He brings it as a Gemara in Masechet Kedushin. And he says, you know what? When you look at yourself, you have to look at yourself as 50-50. Exactly. And the very next action will turn you either into a Sadiq or a Rasha. Because a Sadiq is a person with more mitzvot, a Rasha is a person with more averot, and someone in the middle is 50-50. Now you have to look at yourself as 50-50. And the very next action you take, that's going to determine who you are, what you are. This is what it is. If you're always thinking that, then every action that you're about to take, you analyze it to say, that action will define me. Not just, I'm 50-50 is good. The very next action I take will define who I am as a person. Very often we say, yeah, I did this, but that's not me. That's not who I am. No. Your actions are who you are. And you have to look at it, every action taking prior to taking that. Right now I'm 50-50. This very next action will define me as a person. It's an amazing thought if we're always thinking that way.
The whole year, you're saying? The whole year?
The whole year.
Not Kippur.
Not just Kippur.
Oh, I feel like...
Every time I do something, this is a defining moment. Every time. It's a rough one. Then, if you think that's tough, he doesn't stop there. He goes, and not only that, you have to view your whole town as filled with everybody who's 50-50. And your very next action won't just define you, it'll define the town you live in. And then he goes, and by the way, I'm going to extend it to the country. And eventually extend it to the entire world. So literally, the whole world's on your shoulders depending on your very next action. Every time. That's a tall order. That's a tall order. In fact, I remember he used to say this a lot. And he used to say, I understand. He would give the story. He goes, guy goes to the rabbi. He says, what happened? So he reads, opens out a mom. He says, you're 50-50. Yeah, 50-50. I got to do one mitzvah. One mitzvah, you'll be a tzaddik. Right now, you're in the middle. Guy goes home. He sits. He studies all day. Reads Torah. He goes, Rabbi, what am I now? He goes, 50-50. 50-50. Yesterday, you told me I was 50-50. I spent the whole day. You came to me. What was I going to tell you? You got a shot? I don't want to tell you. Barely 49%. I didn't want to tell you that. Here's a shot. Okay, now 50-50? Yeah? Okay. He goes home. He goes. He does everything for his mom. He goes. He takes care of his mother. What happened to my kid? He's taking this, that. Mom, what do you need? Pure. They come around. What am I? Oh, you're 50-50. What 50-50? Really, 2 days ago, you were 48. Now you're 50, now 50. And Ad Kedekah, he used to tell this as a humorous end of it. But the idea is the same idea. That I'm always looking at my very next action to define me. That the actions that I take are defining of me. And it's not just what I do. There's an interesting, another Rambam, which I'll quote, which he says, which I alluded to. What's the definition of a tzaddik? More averot, less mitzvot. More tzaddik, more mitzvot, less averot. Rasha, more averot, less mitzvot. And the Benoni is smack in the middle. Okay, what are they supposed to do? So a tzaddik on Rosh Hashanah is written to life. Rasha on Rosh Hashanah, written to death. Benoni, the guy in the middle, for him, we have Aseri Yemei Teshuvah. Benoni is 50-50. Now, if I would ask you, or anyone here, if you were defined as a Benoni, so what would be the advice? What should I do? What do you think that Rabbi will tell you to do? I want to become a tzaddik. What should I do? What do you think he would tell him to do?
Mitzvot.
What?
Mitzvot.
Right, do another mitzvah or 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, and you're good.
Or erase the averot.
He doesn't say do mitzvot. Somebody says. Which is perplexing. Everyone asks this question. He says the Benoni has to do tshuva and aseri yemei tshuva. And if he doesn't do tshuva, he'll wind up with the Rasha'im. Why? First, 2 questions. Why only tshuva? Do mitzvah, you're good. Not only tshuva is his way out. And second, and okay, let's say he stays that way. Rasha, not fair. For years, I struggled with that. Until I finally came up with what I think is a real plausible interpretation. based on other areas of Harambam's writing. Harambam says, oh, by the way, when we count it, it's not this numerical count that you think we can do. We count it only through the wisdom of God. So what kind of wisdom of God? Everyone could count, but you need God's wisdom. So he says, no, there's some Avera worth many mitzvot, some mitzvot worth, only God knows. So to explain what I think he's getting at is, everybody has mitzvot, everybody has Averot. And if it's not simply a quantitative count, as the Rambam explicitly says, then we have to deepen our understanding of what's happening here. A Sadiq, the mitzvot are what define him. In other words, when he performs this mitzvot, that's who he is. He is an Oved Hashem. He's a servant of God. The Averot are aberrations of his character. He has them. He has to deal with them. But he's still a Sadiq. En Sadiq ba'arz asher yaseh tov velo yeheta. There's no such thing as a Sadiq who does only good and never sins. Doesn't exist. Certainly not in Jewish thought. The Torah is very clear. Of the greatest personalities, nobody's whitewashing anything, right? Everyone had faults. But the faults were aberrations. The defining element of who they were was the focus, God-centered focus, and it was their mitzvot. Likewise, every person does good things. Even a Rasha can help somebody every now and then. But, as the flip side, the Rasha is self-absorbed. It's not a servant of God. His focus is not God-focused. It's self-focused. Whatever works for him. Every now and then, doing somebody a favor could work for him. And so, therefore, his good deeds are aberrations. Right? What defines him is evil. What defines him is bad. That's his defining persona. What is the Benoni? And here I say, and this is a bit of a difficulty that we find all too often. The Benoni has no worldview. He has no focus. The Rasha has a focus. The Tzaddik certainly has a focus. The Rasha has a focus. It's not good. It could be destructive. But it's a clear focus, a point of view. Benoni, he's sort of nowhere. He'll do a mitzvah, he'll do a avera, he'll get up and do good things, then tomorrow do a bad thing. And there's no context to who he is. Just doing another mitzvah on a Aseret Yemei Teshuvah is absolutely not the point. Because he's doing mitzvah and he's doing averot. If we tell him do more mitzvah, yeah, he'll do more mitzvah. No problem. That doesn't change his status as a Benoni. Because it's not about a count. It's about the context of what he is. The Benoni needs to develop a focus and a context and a worldview to enrapture his actions. That's called Teshuvah. If he doesn't do that, it's too difficult to exist, and he'll probably wind up and this happens unfortunately all too often, he'll probably be caught in the web of the Rasha. Much easier than winding up with the Tzaddikim. So when people go without any focus, context, or worldview, that's what we call a Benoni. That person needs Teshuvah, needs guidance, needs development. Our generation, more than any I know, has so many confused individuals. Confused youth. Was they see good things, and they want to do good things, and they do good things. But where does it all lead? With the very foundations. You know, when I remember my grandmother, that was just simple. She didn't need to study this. The context of what she learned in her father's house and what he learned in his father's house was just, it provided the context. That's why I say our grandparents were all tzaddikim. Were they all the most righteous of every single mitzvah? Maybe not. Maybe some were more, some were, but the context was clear to them. All their actions were part of a system. That's why I call them tzaddikim. But for us, there's been some break. And very often, we find people just confused. What's the point of all this? I'm doing it, but I'm not doing it. And that is part of the key element of education and about Teshuvah. The idea is it all has to mean something. It all has to be part of a context. It all has to be part of that worldview. Otherwise, we're just binunim running around confused. And that's the prescription that Harambam brings. We all have to think about Teshuvah. Therefore, when Harambam talks about Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, what does he say we're supposed to do? We're supposed to, the shofar really starts it. The shofar wakes us up from what? Our slumber, our spiritual slumber. We're thinking we're just doing things without thinking why, how, and what. We just go through a routine. And he says, we forget the truth in the vanity of our days. We just forget. We're so busy. We get, the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Hayim Luzato, Misrael Sharim says, one of the true enemies is being too busy to think. Too busy to think. He advocates every day, preferably at night, going through the process of analyzing everything you did that day. If you think about it, it's not really so hard. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes. Let's go. Before you go to sleep, let's think, okay, just go through your day. I woke up, I went here, I met this person. Stop. A little bit of a problem. Well, I did a good thing here, I did a good thing. And you could do it in 10 minutes. 5 to 10 minutes before you go to sleep. And he says to do it every single day that I'm hot. And think. What the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah is about is thinking. It's about stepping out of the rotation and the rote existence of my week, of my year, and saying, okay, I got to stop. That shofar is waking me up. Aseret Yemei Teshuvah is saying, put a context to everything I'm doing and saying, what am I here for? What am I doing? Then you make those decisions, okay? And then you start looking at the specifics. Right? I always say Rosh Hashanah is the day we just tell God we're in. We accept, you're the king, we're in. I have Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, the days we're in now. I got to think about what I've done and where I'm going. And epitome is on Yom Kippur, right? Those are the days. So that's really what this time period is about. It's about consciousness. It's about thinking. It's about reflection. It's actually about the responsibility of our actions and making true decisions and accepting that we make our own decisions. And that's really what this is about. It's each person accepting the responsibility to make his own decisions and what that means and the consequences of his actions. And that's why in Hilchot Teshuvah, Harambam has a tremendous philosophical discussion on free will. Why? He discusses the whole philosophical concept of free will. The very famous question is, if I can choose, and God knows what I'm going to choose, can I really choose? All those very famous questions, they're all in Hilchot Teshuvah. Why in Hilchot Teshuvah? Bring it in Yisodei Torah, they all where the philosophical level. Because free will and the establishment of the belief in free will is the first step to accepting consequences for your actions. And it's the first step to saying, I've done wrong and I can now have to make the decision to do Teshuvah. I have to believe that I'm responsible for my own decisions. sometimes it's too easy to forfeit that free will. No, I couldn't help it, right? No, my psychologists do this. Even religious people do this sometimes. We forfeit our free will and the responsibility of our own actions we say, well, I couldn't help it. I was brought up this way. My parents beat me. I don't know, whatever it is. All sorts of excuses of that why I couldn't be in control of my own actions. Or sometimes we say, I don't want to decide anything, right? And somebody else. I'll forfeit the decision to somebody else. It could be a rabbi. It could be somebody else. Because making my own decisions and accepting my own responsibility for my own decisions is too painful. As painful as it might be, that's what the Torah demands of us. That's what the accounting now demands of us. And that's what Teshuvah at its cornerstone is about. B'ezrat Hashem, we should spend the next few time until Yom Kippurim thinking about where we've been, where we want to be, bridging that gap, making those commitments, doing the absolute and utmost of our Teshuvah, B'ezrat Hashem, a Teshuvah of Yirah that leads to a Teshuvah me'ahava, and Hashem should inscribe us all, Be'emet, B'sefer Hayim Tovim, in the book of life, in the book of goodness, and we should all have a year that gives us prosperous, B'Mashiach Tzidkenu, Amen.
Amen.
There's any questions or thoughts on
Yeah, I actually have a question. On Kippur, we list out all these things. There's a whole litany of things we list out, like a lot of things that none of us, I don't think, in this room have ever done.
I certainly hope not. But
Right. But my question is, when you listen to these things, it kind of throws you off. Like you want to do on your own, internalize.
Right. So first of all, there's before I answer that, I want to say that what you said is correct. I really think that everyone before Kippur should make, I did this for years. Nobody has to know. Take a little piece of paper, could be a sticky, and jot down, very private, you don't have to show it to anybody, the things you've done that you want to do Teshuvah. And you'll find it in there, by the way. I used to take a sticky, make notations, stick it by the vidui, right? Put it there. And when I got there, I knew where it was. But that's very important, because the vidui has to be personal. The essence of the vidui being so large, right, is that it could be communal and personal at the same time. In other words, most people haven't done half of that stuff, right? But it's all there. So while it's communal for everybody, it could still be personal. So the grandiose, large element of all those sins, right? Whatever you're worried about is probably there somewhere. Of course. And therefore, I always used to recommend people go through the vidui. Maybe in pencil, make a mark or put it on the side and say, I'm going to stop. You should read through it before, in Hebrew or English. Go through and say, here I'm going to stop. This is something I need to think about. And you have a list of whatever it is, whatever you really personally are troubled about your past, and where you want to move forward. And that's why I think the fact that it's large enough, don't forget we're saying it out loud, and everyone's saying it, it really encompasses anything anyone in that kahal should find will be there somehow. Yeah, that's the simple answer. The Mekubalim have a whole other approach to your past worlds and things like that. Simple peshat is you have your stuff, everyone in the kahal is covered. But everyone in the kahal should make it personal as well. That's right.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
how do you self-analyze? It's very difficult to do because if you did something, you wouldn't do something you don't think is wrong.
Right. So that's the difficult thing, because everybody can find a justification of what they do, right? You know, Lahavdil. I'm not comparing it at all. But till his probably dying moment, Adolf Hitler probably thought he didn't do anything wrong. Responsible for the death of maybe 50 million people, right? Probably not. And probably most evil people on earth. That's the challenge. The challenge is really, and you can only, lihit vadot, anahnu mitvadim, it's a reflexive of the, what is reflexive? Means I do it to myself. I confess to myself, not to God. God, they say, is just listening in on the conversation. You're having the conversation with yourself. You have to be able to, with yourself, say, you have to go through it and be brutally honest and say, okay, cut all the justifications out. It's not easy. It's literally, it's work. It's really a lot of work. It's really coming down and saying, yeah, I could justify this 20 ways, but really was it right? Really was it good? It's hard. That's why you really need to spend a lot of time becoming in touch with who you are. If you don't do that, you're not getting into it. It's down and dirty and saying, really? It's not an easy day to go through. It's a lot of work to do. And that's why we have to say the vidui 10 times. We say the vidui on Kippur 10 times in a day, in 24 hours. Because it doesn't sink in just reading it once. It's I gotta think about it. And we gotta prepare it beforehand. And we say the vidui every day in the tefillah, and every day in the slichot b'aseri Teshuvah. And then we say the vidui just in case, just before Kippur. We're saying vidui all day. Why? Hajj. I said it already. What do you want from me? I guess you gotta really say it. You gotta really, really think about it, internalize it, know what it's saying. Come on. It was real. Right? I'll take a trivial one, but it's not trivial. No Avidah is trivial. But I talked during Sefer Torah. It's in the vidui. Okay. I talked. I was this. It was important. I had to do it. Read it again. I talked during Sefer Torah. I know, but I shouldn't have, but after 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times, I talked during Sefer Torah. I say, I shouldn't have talked during Sefer Torah. In other words, we gotta grain it in because we are, in our nature, is to justify who we are. That's our nature. So we gotta say, we gotta overcome that nature. And therefore we gotta keep pounding it in until we finally say, it was wrong.
10 times.
We do it 10 times. We do it 10 times. We do it twice in every tefillah. Arbit has it twice. Every tefillah has twice, but each one has it in lahash and in hazara. But arbit that has no hazara, we do it within the silihot, right in there. And in the lahash, we do a short vidui in the silent amidah. And in the hazara, we usually do, that's what we do the long one.
Should we be saying it in English at all? When we're saying it, or just only?
Absolutely, you can say it in English. And if you want to say it in English, you don't have to say it in Hebrew at all. Just say the words hatati, aviti, pashati. Then everything else can be done in total English. You have to know what you're saying. There's no value of just reading things you don't understand. If Hebrew doesn't do it, say the vidui in English. Absolutely. Right?
Okay. Any other questions? Rabbi Chananya ben Shama Shekh